Okay, children, now we are in the 10th chapter of What is Climate Change by Gail Herman, and it is on heat waves. You already asked before, is it really a wave? And sometimes when you see in the newspapers, this may be written as one word, heat wave, sometimes written as two words, heat waves. Both are accepted. So what is a heat wave? I already said that it's not actually a wave that comes in and goes out with ups and downs. It is called a heat wave because the heat suddenly can spike and last for one day or few days, and if you're really unfortunate it can last longer than a few days, sometimes weeks, which is bad news not just for human beings. You may be able to go inside and turn on the fan or the AC and travel by car or public transportation. Imagine all the pets and the animals and birds and crops, trees, they are outside standing in this heat. They can get damaged and it's not very easy to protect them at all if the heat wave lasts for a long time. So a heat wave is a period of days or weeks of unusually hot weather. What did we say unusually hot means? What? It's a anomaly. So there is a climatology that you expect, and then the weather may seem unusually hotter than what you expect. So there may be a natural warming where you are. If you are living in a desert, for example, or a dry region, then as spring comes and you expect the warming to begin to build up, and the summer can be very hot, so you may be used to this increasing heat with season. But if it's suddenly a blast of hot air that nobody expected or warmer than people have experienced, you may be very young to remember such things, but you can ask the elders in the house or your brothers and sisters to ask, see if they have experienced the heat wave, and your parents or grandparents may even be able to tell you that they feel that these heat waves are becoming more often and they feel worse than before, and so on and so forth. So with higher temperatures it makes sense we would have more heat waves and that they would last longer. What do we mean by with higher temperatures? You are an expert in it by now. We humans are increasing greenhouse gases by using fossil fuels, coal, petrol, gasoline, gas, natural gas, etc., for producing energy and everything else, cooking and so on. And we are trapping more and more of the thermal energy, trying to escape Earth and go to space because we are increasing the greenhouse effect, the greenhouse gases, and the blanket is getting thicker and thicker. And you remember that the warm atmosphere is a thirsty atmosphere, which means it may also begin to have more humidity. What does it do? You may live in a place where humidity is a seasonal thing. In the winter it may be cooler and drier, but in the spring and summer it may be hotter and more humid. Why does it matter if it's humid? When it gets humid and hot, you will begin to sweat if you are outside. That's because your body is trying to get rid of the heat it is feeling by evaporating the sweat from your skin. Just remember that how much water the atmosphere can hold depends on how warm it is and how much water vapor it already has. It's like taking a sponge and putting water on it. If it's already soaked, then it will not take any more water. The water will just run off. And when it's hot, everything evaporates, but depends on how much water vapor there is already. So if it gets very humid, your body may not be able to get rid of the heat by sweating, because sweating depends on how humid the atmosphere is. So these are called heat index and so on and so forth, dew point, temperature, etc. You may have learned in school, but now you have to connect it to the heat waves. So again, remember that heat waves are in many places increasing. What does it mean? they may come more often than they used to before. Even in the natural world, you had some heat waves because the heat gets moved around by the winds, which are always there, but we are changing the winds, we are changing temperatures, so we are changing the amount of heat being moved around as well. So they may become more frequent or more often, coming more often than what your grandpa may remember from before. And they can also get more intense. So instead of getting just 1 degree warmer than climatology or 2 degrees, it may get 5 degrees warmer, which nobody is used to in their memory. And then you have also the area that it can cover. So maybe it used to be just over Pune, but now it is covering larger scales of Maharashtra or just in Mumbai, but maybe it's now all the way down the west coast of India or wherever you are, right? So this is something we are carefully watching for, and a lot of historical data for the last few decades has been looked at by the scientists doing their detective work and saying that yes, there are places where the duration, how long the heat wave lasts, maybe it used to last only 1 or 2 days, now it's lasting 5 days, 10 days and so on. The intensity, how much warmer than normal it is, and the frequency, how often it is coming, or maybe even coming in unseasonal temperatures, like spring shouldn't be so warm where you are maybe, but the spring is getting warmer and heat waves are coming in spring instead of just coming in summer. I keep saying spring because it's spring, but when I say spring, maybe you pay more attention. Just a joke. In 2010, Russia experienced one of the worst heat waves on record. Russia, unless you are from there, you think of it as a cold place with lots of snow and people wearing heavy mink coats and so on and so forth. Maybe mink is not a good thing now. You don't want to kill animals for fur and so on, but you expect them to be going around in skull caps and big coats and so on with cold weather. But they do have a summer, and once in a while they do get heat waves. But in 2010, they experienced one of the worst heat waves on their record. For the first time ever, temperatures reached 100 degrees Fahrenheit there. You can convert it to degrees centigrade if you want, and you can see that's really warm, right? So that's not fun. So unused to those conditions, Russians are not used to such warm temperatures, and of course they are not prepared for such hot temperatures because they never expect them, which resulted in 55,000 people dying. 55,000. That's a very, very large number. Okay, so we talked about weather forecasts and climate forecasts and so on. If there was a weather forecast that said we have a heat wave coming, maybe people would have been prepared better, but maybe they were caught by surprise. Experts from the National Center for, this is Russia here, with two Russians going around looking like they're in hot sun, and this woman is measuring the temperature and saying, I cannot believe that in St. Peter's Square we have such warm temperatures. Experts from the National Center for Atmospheric Research and other institutions say if greenhouse gas emissions aren't curbed, reduced, stopped from increasing, the number of abnormally hot days could become much more frequent. So duration, intensity, frequency, and the area covered. Okay, scale of the heat waves. Okay, where is the National Center for Atmospheric Research? It is in Boulder, Colorado, on Table Mesa, a beautiful city, and of course in the state of Colorado in the USA. And if you get a chance to visit, or if you live there, you know how beautiful it is. According to Dr. Michael Mann, the distinguished professor of atmospheric science at Penn State University in Pennsylvania, which is another state in the USA, and Dr. Lee R. Kump, professor and head of the Department of Geosciences at Penn State, by the end of the century, St. Louis, Missouri, as an example, could have more than 40 continuous days of brutal temperatures. So Lee Kump at the time of this book was the head of the department. He may not be anymore, but he will certainly be still a professor unless he retired, and Michael Mann is still around as the distinguished professor of atmospheric science. Maybe he has some other new title as well. But they did projections for the future from the models that we talked about for various places in the US, and the example of St. Louis, Missouri, which is another Midwestern states in the United States, could have more than 40 continuous days of brutal temperatures. You can imagine people will have a hard time surviving these, especially older and younger people. But imagine vegetation, birds and animals and crops that are out there in the open suffering from this heat, and you could have reduced yields of corn, which grows a lot here, and other soybean and so on and so forth. More heat waves mean more droughts, long periods with little rainfall. It may seem strange that global warming can cause both droughts and floods. After all, they are opposite conditions. Droughts brings very little rain or much lower than normal rain or no rain, but flood means lots of water all of a sudden. So in areas with little rain, high temperatures pull moisture from Earth's surface into the air. What does it mean? We are warming the climate by adding more greenhouse gases and trapping thermal energy. We're changing the winds, we're changing the amount of energy that has to be moved when we do that, and we are moving heat from one place to another, which means we are moving water vapor. So we are taking water vapor from one place to giving it to another place. It's raining more heavily in one place and not raining as much, or raining much less than normal in another place, and so on and so forth. So the drops that evaporate when you have a hot atmosphere, it's a thirsty atmosphere, can hold much more moisture, which means all the water in the soil, lakes and rivers, and even the vegetation can lose its water vapor. How? You know that when photosynthesis happens, leaves open what are called stomatas. They are trying to capture the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. If you're too young to understand, don't worry. During photosynthesis, water molecules and carbon dioxide are combined with chlorophyll and sunlight to produce, energy they need through carbohydrates and sugar. And if they open the stomata and the atmosphere is very thirsty, they will rapidly lose that water vapor they are trying to save. Where did the water come in the leaf? It's being brought up from the roots with hard work. They want to open the stomata just as long as to capture enough CO2 and close it to form carbohydrates via photosynthesis. But when they open, if the atmosphere is very thirsty, it's going to take out more and more water vapor from the leaf. Okay, so these drops evaporate and disappear into the heat and go elsewhere. Right, so the air pulls even more moisture. If that happens, the ground becomes dry and dusty, and you begin to get dust storms, and lakes and ponds dry up, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we'll come back and look at more details on heat waves, but you can see how heat waves are related to the greenhouse gas increase, the increasing temperature, increasing humidity, wind changes, droughts and floods, and lots of desiccation of the soils because the warm atmosphere is sucking up the water in the soil and rivers and ponds and creating dusty conditions, and so on and so forth. We'll come back and discuss a little bit more about the heat waves. Okay, see you in the next podcast, children.